Right then, here we are. We're a little bit of an enforced hiatus because a bout of illness, Mark, which took you sideways. I had to delay our original meeting, and then just so happened that the time that we decided to book for, you got ill, and so we weren't able to record. But I'm glad you're fighting fit again. I was actually quite surprised when you sent me a message to say that you'd got ill, because that doesn't necessarily happen to you, really, does it? But anyway, if you say to me that you're ill, you're really ill.
It was an out of date salmon fillet, and it wasn't too out of date, so I thought I'll go for it. It smelt fine. There was no tingling on the tongue. However, by 3 a.m, I was visiting the bathroom every 30 minutes up until just before we were doing the Zoom. And I had to fly to Edinburgh in the afternoon to start an intervention with Edinburgh Hockey Club, an 18-month intervention. So it was kind of, okay, we need to flush the system out, don't eat for 24 hours and allow it to run its course. Lesson learnt, my body is not robust for 1 day out of date salmon fillets.
Wow, there you go then. That'll be a lesson learned, isn't it? Yes. It's reminded me actually of the famous scene in Monty Python's Meaning of Life where the Grim Reaper comes to collect the people who've eaten the tinned salmon. It's a brilliant scene. Highly recommend it. If I can link it in the show notes, I will.
Showing your age, Stuart. Showing your age there.
Well, at least the Grim Reaper didn't come to collect you. At least you were just indisposed for a day. Yeah. Right. So I think we probably need to start with our long overdue prize draw for the people who have been very patiently waiting to hear whether they have been able to access some extremely low cost access to all of your learning space, or the star prize, which is obviously the mentoring time with you. So I know you're prepared for this, and you're about to draw the names out of the official hat, which you actually officially have right in front of you.
Yes, there we go. Upside down, but the PDS cap as we go through here. Now, I have all the names in here, all folded out. Now, the names are whatever your title is on the YouTube, where you wrote the comments, that is what's on. So this isn't actually the name of people because I don't know the actual name. This is whatever you call yourself on YouTube in the comments. Okay, so the first prize is 95% off joining the members area, plus a one-to-one Zoom with me free. So that's circa £750 worth there. So I shall do a shuffle and then raise, so no one can think I'm cheating. You say when, Stuart. Say when.
When.
Oh, okay. So first prize is, forgive me if I pronounce this wrong, Michael or Michelle, Gentile or Gentil 69. So spelt Golf Echo November Tango India Lima Echo 69. So if that's you, please send a direct message to Stuart or direct message to me, and I can check that's you. Obviously do it through YouTube. So then we can get in contact and sort out your prize. Runners up. So we have Maxio Pondo, MBAI 3384. So you have a 75% off joining the members area. And this is a bit shorter. Ash LARJJ is, let's see. I bet you're thinking, how do people make these names up now, Stuart, on the YouTube?
I really am.
So, longer one. But easier to say. So Jason Shan says consulting. And the final one is Raymond Moore 5885. So all of you have the 75% off joining the members area. So please get in touch, and then I can share the code with you that only you can use, and it's coded so only you can use it. So yeah, don't share it because it won't work.
Excellent. Well, that's good.
There
We
we go.
managed to get that done, and glad that everybody got involved. I think that's going to be, I mean, as my own learning journey through the learning area is continuing, there is a gigantic encyclopedia of information in there that's, continuously evolving. So there's definitely a lot of value to be gained by the people who are engaging in that. Now, before we launch into today's topic, I'm going to just quickly remind everybody that if they can like, subscribe, share and comment, that's actually really beneficial to help the channel grow, help the podcast grow. And it would be really appreciated by us, because we now know that lots of people are beginning to actually get to experience these conversations for the first time and experience sort of the power of PDS for the first time. And that in itself has been valuable to some people who've been getting in touch. So the more you can do to do that, obviously it helps us, but it definitely helps those people that you share it with. So think of it as a gift that you can give to somebody else. Don't keep these secrets to yourself. They're not secrets, they're to be shared. Right, so Mark, weave our way gently into today's subject matter, because we're going a little bit topical today, having deep dived into some of the heavy duty elements of PDS. We're going to go more into sort of topical stuff and then relate that to elements of PDS. So weave it in.
So yes, topical at the moment is obviously we have the rugby union in UK, the Six Nations, and Wales, who are passionate about rugby as a nation, and they have lost a record amount of games in a row, and they are the lowest have ever been in the world rankings. And their present coach is now being reviewed by their national governing body in the Wales Union as a review whether to keep him or not. Some people on social media are asking, should he go? Although he is still one of the best coaches, rugby coaches in the world, bar none. He's had great success at the highest level, and it's an example of how people are looking for somebody to blame for results, and not actually looking at is that coach better or worse than that coach was before, or are there other variables out of that coach's control that may be impacting so many elements building up to selecting the squad and then selecting the players for the match and then the match result itself.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the areas that I think is one of the challenges, I suppose, when it comes to leadership, but also obviously leadership in sport in this case, is if a leader or if leadership is only ever viewed in light of performance, then obviously that individual can't have just changed. They haven't gone from being a really good leader when the performances were going well to a really poor one when the performances aren't going well. There's other variables at play. Now, it may also be that there are certain things that have changed. There are certain things that have happened within that individual, or, sometimes things run a life cycle and actually they need a bit of a refresh, or sometimes that leader's making an active choice to rebuild an organization because, a particular group of individuals have moved on or changed, or injuries, or a range of different factors, and then they're rebuilding. And so this is about, kind of putting in place the foundations for longer term success. But in the high octane world of elite sport, you don't really have that luxury, do you? Results are everything in many ways, and that becomes an extremely challenging place to be.
Yeah, it's huge. There are so many variables. I talk a lot in the members area about expectations and pre-agreeing expectations with the people of influence. So that may be if you're a manager, a senior executive in business, is when you take on a job or a new cycle of performance, is pre-agreeing with the owners, whoever those hire and firers are, whoever the board is, okay, what are your expectations? Let's agree what they are on this journey. What is success for us? What does it look like? And what's our expectations for 6 months, 12 months, or in certain competitions? And then keeping people into the loop. Now, often that doesn't happen. So we have what's called invisible expectations. Now, in business, what you don't get as much as in elite sport is a fan base of social media sharing their opinions after a result, and pundits on TV sharing an opinion after a result. You may get that on the stock exchange. You may get that some of the investors, whoever owns a business, whether it's employee owned or some top person coming and buying and expecting profits. But if we don't do that, then literally what people tend to grab onto is the result and not understanding where we are. Now, if you look at Warren with Wales Rugby in itself for many years domestically has really been struggling with depth of players and how they're investing in where a national coach would select the players. And then all it takes is a couple of injuries on a weaker capability team compared with the likes of some of the other nations you're working with. And now, there's only so much a manager or coach can do working into something like a Six Nations. You also then have, if you relate that to soccer, you have Manchester City, who's been dominant for many years in championships, winning leagues and championship cups. And all of a sudden now that, mid-season before November, December, I don't even believe they're in the top four with the same manager who was before seen as one of the greatest managers. Not a lot of it has changed. He's had a couple of injuries, which people do, but all of a sudden now they're not getting the results people were expecting. So some jump on, well, what's going wrong? Let's look at someone to blame. And some look at it and say, well, actually, let's see where it goes. We still believe in the manager. We still believe in what they're doing. But then it's that element, if we go back to Williams F1, Stuart, as an example, we've got someone that's come in there and that person has shared with the media and everyone, the whole organization, these are expectations this year. And these are expectations next year. And this is what we're building to in 2026. So he's starting the second cycle now with Williams F1. He's made it quite clear it's still not about results on podiums, etc. This is what we're building towards. And he's been continually really explicit with the media. So this is where the struggle is in sport, how can a manager do that? And do they then have the backing of the fans and the influencers and the owners? But also, do they have the backing of the team? How clear are they at the belief of the squad in the manager, in what they're doing and where they're going? That direction of purpose, that expectation of that. This is why we're doing this now, because this is what it's going to give us in 2, 3, 4 months. Be ready for it, trust the process, but I want to show you what that process looks like. And these are all the variables that if we're looking at it with filters on based on results, only results, we may come up to a false conclusion that would then impact where the blame goes or where the conclusion ends up.
Yeah. So what you made me think about when you were talking about that was I watched a podcast. It's called The Good, the Bad, and the Rugby, which features James Haskell and a couple of other people. And on that podcast was the chief exec of England Rugby, Bill Sweeney, who again has been under fire for a variety of different things. It seems that everything that's going wrong in the world of English rugby falls at his shoes, so to speak. It's interesting because he's only got a certain amount of control over some of these things. But anyway, one of the interesting things about it was, or the bit that I took away, was he came on and he spoke very, very openly and very honestly and very candidly about the challenges that the organisation has faced. And one of the things that the host said to him was, why did it take him so long to come and talk openly about those things? Like, why was everything not necessarily presented? And so what you were talking there a little bit about, I think it's really easy for sports organizations to be very sort of behind closed doors all the time. And I think when you think about sort of environmental influences, and I think a lot about environmental influences on human behavior, as a somebody who's influenced by ecological psychology, and the dynamics and how those dynamics change people's openness and their willingness to engage and all those sorts of things. And as you quite rightly point out, we live in a voracious media ecosystem that is, just unquenchable in its thirst for information on a continuous basis. And the danger is, and I've experienced this myself, that if there is an information vacuum, then people will fill that vacuum with their own thoughts and ideas, as opposed to commenting on the information that they're being presented with, and that's slightly different. And so in the case of, I forget his surname, but James, who is the CEO of Williams F1, he's been very deliberate in making it very, very clear what is excellence for them, what is the performance parameters that they are aspiring to, and being prepared to be judged against the meeting those performance parameters and explaining the process of building, and not over-claiming and saying we're going to be here and shoot for the moon and this, that, and the other, being very, very deliberate about what he believes his organization will be doing and the process that they will be making so that they can go on to this longer term journey of performance. But being clear about excellence for us looks like this at the moment, with what we've got, with the resources that we have, defining excellence for himself, which we've talked about previously. And with this conversation with Bill Sweeney, it just struck me that how the dialogue and the conversation that he had, which was pretty frank, to be fair. And some of it was like some of the challenges leveled at him were just unbearably naive. They had no understanding of the complexities of running a £100 million operation like England Rugby, and the various different demands placed from the community game and the professional game and all these different dimensions that they're working at, and the ways in which you have to work to ensure that there's a genuine sense of togetherness and people feel like they're bought in, and their governance structures, which can sometimes be a bit painful and difficult and slow, but are necessary in order to be a democratic organization where people have a voice. And it was painful and all those sorts of things. But what was great was he prepared to stand there and do it. And it reminded me actually of a really powerful leadership phrase that I got from Tim Hollingsworth, who's the CEO of Sport England. He's actually standing down in the summer. And he said to me that sometimes leadership is standing in front of the plane. And he was evoking the time when there was a CEO of, I think it was British Midland, and there was a horrible air crash years and years and years ago. And he said, sometimes as a CEO, you've got to take it, and you've got to stand in front of the plane, and you've got to say, here I am. This is what's happening. These are the things I'm trying to do. These are the things we're trying to get better at. We recognize things aren't right, but we need to move things forward. And I do think this framing of defining excellence and being clear about what that looks like, because when he explained the stuff he'd done financially, where they were, which was a financial wreck, to where they are now, which is actually a financial powerhouse, English rugby's in really, really good health, and now beginning to start to see the benefits of that. And I'm not saying that just because they beat France at the last minute on the weekend. I'm saying that we are beginning to see the green shoots of a rebirth of English rugby, right? Which is a really good thing to see. And people don't make the connection because there's usually a time lag between these two things. The organisation gets itself organised, and then the performances on the field come there behind. But you don't see the work that the leader does, and sometimes they get removed before they actually get the chance for the work that they've done to take it on. So, sorry, that's a very long-winded explanation, but I just thought there's a lot of thoughts there that just seem to connect with this notion of framing excellence, but being clear about it and explicit with people. And that's the bit, not leaving it the grey. And that's the bit you talk about a lot, leaving it in the grey. And I think too many people are leaving it in the grey.
Yeah, and also it's not allowing the tail to wag the dog. So when I'm working in global business and in the elite sports, the amount of conversations I'm hearing when I'm in the room about, well, what should we say? To the media, what should we say to the board, as opposed to, well, hang on a minute. One, we shouldn't be reactive. What did we agree? Are we aligned? Are we on the path we said to expect, and why we're on that journey? What we're looking at? What are our performance markers you can look out for now in this first 6 months or a year? So then the people are looking for them. If we're not doing that first, we become reactive. We become reactive to their unhappiness. And now we're thinking, what should we say? And I think it's even tougher for the media, where we've got managers and coaches, what should we say to the media? What should we not? Because they know whatever they're going to say, that recording is going to be edited, and something in that recording is going to be shared globally across social media that may be out of context. So the cleaner we are, and not allowing things like the media or influencers are not helpful to make sure, actually, what are the things are we saying? Have we pre-agreed it? Have we set the vision and direction and the steps we're taking? Is everyone of influence? Are we clear on that? And if things aren't going well or things need to change, are we being proactive then and saying why? What tends to happen a lot in business and in sport is when things aren't going well or people don't commit to what they've said they're going to do, is they become silent with it as opposed to actually interacting it. They're going, oh, I won't mention something, I'll avoid, or I'll come up with an excuse. Go, no. Now's the time to have the conversation. Let's have it early, because then we can understand each other and do something about it and make the adaptations and move forward. The more it becomes silent, the more it starts to splinter. And the problems become bigger. And then near the end, now it's a bigger problem that requires more time to find a solution for. So that pre-agreement of clarity, letting everyone of influence understand this is a journey we're on, this is what to expect in these time phases, this is a reality of what we're working with. So James, as you said in Williams, made it quite clear, look, we haven't invested in the infrastructure, all the design elements we need to, etc. But this is where we're going. But the ripple to results is going to be 2-3 seasons away. That's where we're going to go. And also now an example would be, and you talk about ever changing, Stuart, is obviously Formula One's an example, is in 2026 there's a whole rule change. New engine, dynamic rules, aero rules. So therefore, why invest now on something I'm not going to get a return on? Why not build the mechanisms for growth and success in people, organizational change, and the equipment, the design to be ready for the big change in 2026, but make everyone aware of that and then get people excited about what do I need to do now that's going to have an impact for 2026. Now we can do that in business. We can do that across sports. I certainly do that when I go into organizations, and this is where that first element of behavioral shifts in people that are used to avoiding. People are used to making excuses. People are used to reacting to defend their position and not proactively looking forward and being open if they don't understand, if they disagree, if they struggle with understanding of clarity of role, and having the conversations early, then having the conversations as we go and keep them alive. That's when things become easier. So this is where you're going to get someone like James for Williams F1, for example, when he gets interviewed this season coming, he's in a good place because he's already made it clear. Well, what did I say we were? Well, we're here. We're ready. We're a little bit ahead. We're a little behind, but we're on track. But these are the influences. This is why we've had to adapt, or this is why we're slightly ahead. But hey, we've just got a podium. Don't get excited and expecting a podium again next race, because this is why we got the podium, because of opposition, crashed out, weather conditions. We got there was lots of variables that gave us that result, but don't expect it next week, because that's not in our control. And it's that level of clarity allows people to better understand the journey somebody is on. And I think managers and corporate organization can do better with the board on that. Sports teams can do better on the boards within that, but also they can do better with the media on that side of things. And I think the problem we have is if we're looking at sport and media, a lot of the people that making the noise are not the informed, but they have a greater noise, a greater following, and they influence others. And all of a sudden, someone's white noise becomes a belief truth. Now that ends, and sometimes we've seen people being fired because of the pressure from the media, as opposed to, hang on a minute, is this the right choice to make, or are we being pressured by the media? We see it in politics all the time as well, don't we, Stuart, without going into politics. And going back to your point, Stuart, when you were talking about the RFU as an example, now, for people that are listening that don't know, Stuart, you were working in a part of the RFU in the development, so you were inside the organization, weren't you? So you could see the bigger picture.
Well, yes, and I understand the complexities of working in an organisation like that and how things need to work and the time it takes to put those things in place. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I think there are definitely aspects of sports governance that need to modernise. I think the demands. sorry, not the demands, but the way in which I think people now expect change to take place, and the agility that you need to be able to work with sometimes doesn't exist, because sports organizations, particularly ones that are kind of member based, and they're made up of, so if you take take RFU as an example in the rugby, they're essentially a members organization, and the members of the clubs, there's about 1,600 clubs, and those clubs essentially then elect, they're usually grouped by counties. So there's various stakeholder factions, but also they're grouped by counties. So, each county gets a representative, forms the council, and there's various other people on there. And those people, that council essentially is the sort of the governing body itself. And then they elect, or essentially they appoint a board and a chief executive and an executive team to then essentially carry out the wishes of the membership. So in principle, the national body only really exists to carry out the wishes of the membership. And the way the RFU is structured, which is different from many others, and people don't necessarily realize this, is that historically, the way a governing body would ordinarily work, golf, for example, which worked in for a number of years, is that revenues are collected from club members and then passed through to the national body in order for the national body to then enact the wishes on a national scale of that local membership for the good of the game, because you need a nationally representative organisation to be able to attract inward investment, etc. But in the RFU's case, it works the other way around. There is affiliation and stuff like that, but actually what generally happens is that the RFU makes such an amount of commercial revenue from TV rights stuff and from gate receipts at Twickenham and various other things. It actually generates all its revenue independently and then cascades that down into the grassroots game. Around about 30 million a year goes into grassroots, 30 million goes into sort of performance pathway activities, and then about 30 million goes on sort of professional England team elite work. And it's really interesting because that's quite a significant operation that they're running there, and the way that works is very, very different. And if it didn't exist, then the grassroots community game would be really impoverished. Now, knowing all of that, right, the problem you've got with all of that is you've got so many stakeholders with so many vested interests that it's extremely difficult to make change. And so any individual, I think people think that an individual leader can go in and just go magically flick a switch. A professional sports organization, you've got more possibilities of that, but not exclusively, because Warren Gatland is still going to be responsible to a board and to a council and to stakeholder representation. And the level of support and resources he gets is going to be determined by them. And so in many ways, they don't just have the ability to switch things on in a national team role. Professional sports organizations, a little more, but you're still required to make, concessions to sponsors and other investors and all those sorts of things. So the dynamics at play are really quite complex. But one of the things that really struck me about working in that organization is that very easily, I think, a leader can find themselves in a real difficult decision, right? It's almost like an ethical decision, which is, do we sort of drag the organization kicking and screaming and sort of really do the modernization agenda that we need? Because that's what the people out there are looking for, and the people people who become representatives, they very often go there with their volunteers very often, and they go there with an idealized notion of pretty much wanting to keep things the same. And so if you're not careful as a leader, you get trapped in this world where, the system itself does exactly what it's designed to do, which is to maintain the status quo, right? And so it takes a brave leader to say, no, we're going in a different direction, because that's what's demanded. That's what the people are asking for. Sometimes those elected representatives aren't always representing the best interests of the people out there, particularly the wider community who don't necessarily have the understanding of the governance systems. They know they need to make change because societal changes bring about. And I know this is true, by the way, because certain sports leaders have come to me, for example, when I was working at Sports England, saying, we need you to bring about this change. We need you to actually tell us to do this, because otherwise we can't get the momentum internally to bring about the change, particularly on things like inclusion, equality, those sorts of agendas, trying to open up sport and make it more accessible. Very often that isn't that well received. And so sometimes you need to force that. So I know how leaders find it difficult to stick their necks out for some of these things. And it's very, very easy to criticize them for not doing so. And so, you've got to be mindful of the dynamics that you're operating within and the speed of change that you can go with. And that's often what people, but people don't see that. All they see is there's inertia. I'm not getting what I want. I'm going to call for somebody's head. And that's not always the best way to be.
No, and it's separating two elements here. One is change needed, or actually it's just where we are with who we've got. But we've got to keep doing what we're doing right now. There's nothing we can do to change. Warren may be in that situation. So I have this amount, I have these players. This is all I can pick from. I've got some injured. What can I do with who I have right now? What can I get the best out of them right now? And the one thing I can't control is the level of the opposition capability right now, within this year, within this season. So that situation is, can I win the hearts and minds and keep them within the team of influencers I need to? So one is aboard, hey, you're doing the best of what you got, Warren. No problem. We believe in you. There's no point in getting anyone else in. You're one of the best in the world. And then within the players and the fellow coaches, no, we totally believe in what you're doing, Warren. You know, what can we do? We've just lost on the bounce. What can we do right now in our performance and our behaviors that will give us the best chance of success in every single practice session, building up to the next match? And also, we need to manage the injuries. We need to manage the load. So all of these variables, that's where someone like a leader. Then we have the example of the change element is recognizing, well, what do we need to change? So we need to know where we need to go. Well, that's that lighthouse point. What does it need to look like? Okay, so where is the change required? Then how do we share the required change with the people that need to change to get them to see the value of the change? Are we spending time doing that? Then when we've done that is understanding, even if someone sees the value in the change, the chances are they won't do it in their busy lives. Some will, some won't. So then we've got to be ready. What mechanism of supporting the change in the patience required for that change, and understanding that can take up to 6 months easily just to get it moving, get it more comfy, is are we prepared to have that patience of that amount of time, but also being relentless on the support and challenge mechanisms that we need to build to be more skilled in to embed that change within the very people that we need to change. And as you say then, Stuart, it's understanding the result is a ripple of the change. So we know change initially is a bit itchy, a bit uncomfortable. Are we smooth at it? Do we see a productive line? Sometimes, not often. But then the result impact, if it's a bigger result, the big, like in a corporate business, whatever their results are on increased sales or profit margins, whatever, that may take 6 months, a year, 18 months. It may take 3 months based on the level of change required. So now we've got to be hitting on, do we need to change? No. Okay, so what do we need to do then to get the best? Is it just a tidal? We've got, the situation's out of our control. Or do we need to change? Okay, so what is it? What are we building towards? Where's the most impactful areas? Who needs to buy into this? Who needs to share the value? Now they see the value. Now they've got to commit to the behaviors required. Do we agree what they are? Okay, now we've got to go on that journey of discomfort, of regression, progress, regression, progress with human beings to get them over months and months going, right now, this is the new way. And all of that, I know we've initiated conversations about that before, Stuart. All of that is that where the leader coming in, two things have to happen. Is they've got to have time to identify, is it a change you need? Or have we got what we need? We just need to get the best out of it. Or is it a change? You that's going to hire me, are you prepared to give me the time and the resources and the autonomy I need to facilitate that change that's required to give you the return that you're looking for? Well, let's have a discussion about that first and some agreements before I say yes. And again, often some organizations of a manager or a head coach manager coming into sports, they don't have that conversation because they want the job. So this is the clarity. And now we're back to the first point you made is now if it's a media element, are we making it very clear to the media, look, this is the journey we're on right now. So this is what you should expect. And let me share with you the markers that you can look for on this journey. If we're a little bit late, no problem. If we're a little bit early, no problem, but we'll let you know. So be ready for this. Or someone like Manchester City, we're saying, look, we got some players, issues. We trust in ourselves. We'll still be top four at the end of the season. It may not be our winning year, but, we're halfway through the season. People are writing us off. No worries. We know what we're doing. We're strategizing. I mean, he did a big recruitment of players to fill those voids of some of the injured. Someone like that is still a great coach and manager based on the parameters of the type team he's building. Now, he may go to another team and not be successful because their culture doesn't align to the way he coaches and manages. So it would be like, square peg, round hole, and saying, hang on, the amount of change we'd need to fit into you of leading us is too much for us. Let's get someone else in that aligns to what we're doing. Still a great manager coach, but actually what you want to is too much of a step change to where we are. Or no, it's the step change we need to get who we need to be. We need you in because we're not going to do it without you, but we understand the discomfort. And these are the variables that we need to look at.
Yeah, I mean, wow, there's a lot to unpack there. Where my mind went was, it strikes me that the other bit that probably people maybe aren't factoring is like how the world adapts. So, for example, you know, if you take, let's take an example of being in the high performance context. So if you take the likes of, say, Guardiola, for example, you know, Guardiola had a way of playing that was extremely impactful. It really worked. It was, it's often referred to, I think, as positionism. This isn't getting like massively into the coaching side of things, but a particular model. And it worked very well. And it worked very well for a particular group. And, you know, because he also had the resources at his disposal, he could almost pick and choose the right players for his model. But of course, what hasn't factored there is that the other teams are always going to watch and observe and analyze and adapt. And this is true in business, isn't it? Because, you know, you might have success for a period of time, but other competitors are going to see what you're doing and then either go, well, we can do that better, or we can do it differently, and this, that, and the other. So this process of adaptation is key. Now, this is where I've spoken to you previously about wanting to do a bit of a deep dive into ARP, because I think there are other applications in ARP. So often you refer to ARP, obviously, as a mechanism or a framework to enable interaction, either between an individual to an individual or an individual to a group, as a mechanism by which to create alignment and agreement around things that we're going to commit to in a goal. But it strikes me that ARP is also a framework for strategy development, and actually not just strategy development as traditionally done, whereby, you know, we do a bit of research and then we put together some aspirations and goals and we say, yes, that's what we're going to try and achieve, and off we go without real clarity as to what's actually going to be required. I actually think it's a strategic. So for me, strategy is something that is continuously evolving. So yes, you would scan, i.e., understand the market, understand the landscape, understand what competitors are doing, understand where you are, and then understand state, i.e., where are you, where are we now, what are we trying to achieve, what have we got, what resources have we got at our disposal, what's the best way for us to move forward, how are we going to do that, and then as we move forward and we go into the commitment phase, we commit, we review, but we can only review if we've fully committed. And then we go through the cycle again, and we continuously go through that cycle as we iterate towards our improvement. And I actually think organizational strategy and tactics can be designed in that way. And the bit I think is, I wonder, again, I can only speculate because I'm not on the inside, but when you see leaders that are very, very successful, and then you see them going through a period of not as successful, because let's face it, they're still pretty successful, they're just not as successful, or they're not meeting their own expectations or the expectations they've established for themselves. I sometimes wonder whether it's actually more of a failure to adapt, i.e., there's a little bit of rigidity to a system or a rigidity to a model that has brought success in the past, without necessarily understanding that model needs to continuously adapt if success is going to be maintained. And let's face it, you can't win everything all the time. You know, only one team can win. So performance parameters need to be established that are different. But for an organization with the resources, say, of Manchester City, you know, the top four is an absolute, you know, anything other than top four is unacceptable, isn't it? So where they are currently languishing, where they are, or, you know, on the outsides of that, is seen to be unacceptable. And it may well be that they'll recover and they'll get back into the position they're expected to be in which case that would be an acceptable result. Not exceptional, but acceptable. You could argue that the serial winning that they've been doing was exceptional, and they're actually now at a more acceptable level. or borderline onto the unacceptable. But I'm wondering if essentially those results were required in order to force adaptation, because up to that point, maybe a degree of comfort had come in. Again, I'm only speculating, but I just see this as a bit of a pattern emerging in organizations that don't necessarily perform that well, is they're not continuously revisiting their strategy. They say, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to do this for the next 10 years. Well, I think that's madness. Or the next 5 years, because those time horizons, there's so much stuff that changes in the meantime. You need to review it all regularly on the basis, but it takes so much work to even create a strategy that people just go, right, brilliant, we've got that done. Right, now we'll just crack on with this business as usual, and then we'll see where we end up at the end. Oh, blimey, we haven't quite hit the target. Oh, we need to do a new strategy. No, I don't think we need to do that. What we need to do is just be revisiting all the time, checking in on what we said we were going to try and achieve and see how realistic that is. And I think ARP is a really nice framework for strategy development and ongoing business improvement.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it should be used even itself, if it's a player on the pitch or a court, or a manager itself, or as an organizational team, is looking ahead for great judgment, but looking at all the data. And then, as you say, ongoing reviewing, looking. And it's a bit like if you really looked at the plan, do, review common model that's been around for many years. It's not really a plan, do, review. It should never be a plan, do, review. It should be a strategize, commit. Review, strategize, commit. Review, strategize, commit. It can't be a closed loop. And that's that point of, are we making the right decisions based on where we want to go now? Okay, how are we doing? Let's review it. Use a framework, so we're not just looking at results. We're looking at the behaviors, the choices, the variables, the influences to go again. But also, how's our execution and our choice separately? That's that back to, am we committing? How's the execution? Is that an upskill required, even that's in business? Or is it the choice element, evolution? But we're going down on, it's a bit like if you've ever done mountaineering or any map reading, you've got to keep realigning and checking the weather conditions, how boggy a marsh is it more flooded, etc. You're saying, well, here was my grid route to A, B, C, D, but actually now I've got to make an adjustment. So I use a compass and a map, readjust. I'm still understanding where I need to go, but it won't be a straight line to get there. But they're informed decisions on the move. And often you're looking at the what ifs before you start. Okay, here's the direction we're looking at, but what are the influences? So weather, instance, injury, illness, time frames, all of these things are variables we need to be ready for. So we're looking ahead. And the other element you mentioned there, Stuart, I'm going to use a different language, but it's really important. And we can use Manchester City as an example, is what I call capability combination. So you can see this in business or in sport, and sport's potentially the easiest to see it. So when you look on a pitch or on a court, you'll have a combination capability. When you put a set of players out within their individual capability and them understanding how to read and bounce off each other, you find that capability combination that just works really, really well. And there's that flow. And, when they're on the pitch as a combination, I can sit back and I've got a smile on my face because I know they're going to execute really well against any opposition. As soon as I move one of those players out and put another one in, even though I've only shuffled one player, the combination capability can drop by 20%, 25%. So that's a mindfulness of saying, okay, two things here if I'm in a sports team, business as well to a degree. With the ever-changing world around me, are we reviewing and be proactive and go live? And is the capability combination future-proof that if someone drops out, decides to retire or hands their notice in or illness, have I got futures to step in there and maintain my capability in our combination that work together interdependency that make us effective and robust? So it's easy to see on a team where you take out one or two influential players and all of a sudden that team can't perform as much. And then align that to what you were saying, Stuart, is opposition will, if you're successful, they'll start to work you out. Now, then you may have a team that's so capability combination strong because you've got the money to pick and the smartness to scout and buy the right players in, that whatever someone does, they can't break you down because they know how to break you down. They just can't because you're so good. But slowly but surely, and we've seen in any sport, no sports team has been number one for 20 years, 30 years. It always has a cycle. We'll get a team at the top for a few years. They start to slow down. Another one comes up. But as you say, there's so many variables. It's almost impossible to stay at the top. But what we can do and businesses can do is, can they future-proof? Can they be more organic and looking at what are we doing now? Are we just sticking with what we got because it's working? Or are we saying, actually, how are we setting up success if we have an individual that moves out? Are we setting up success if we have this adaptation in the world that's going on? COVID was a great example of world impact. One of the businesses I was working with, a global business, the cost of freight, sea freight, went up so much. They were at a loss, everything they were selling before they even got it to the supermarkets, because of that one change of the shipping just threw their prices up for crates. Something like that. Could you think ahead and say we're going to get this global thing called COVID, and the air freight and sea freight is going to go up by 200-300%? Possibly not, but could you look at, yes, there are price changes. Are we ready for them? Buyers, environmental conditions, etc. If you're business and you're buying something that's fruit, vegetables, etc. But in sport, I think you can break it down to the same. So what we've got to ask ourselves is it the right person for the right job? Are we getting the support and autonomy they need? Are we giving them the time they need? If there is change, do they know how to change? Is there a strategy of change that's robust in the humans that need to change, and getting them to see the value to the direction and a support mechanism for the change? Or do you need support in those areas? And then are we giving people the time they need to get the ripple of results based on what we agree successful results are, not expecting to win a league, etc. for every team? It's impossible. Or an organization that we're going to be world number one in this sales, that may be impossible. But what are our success markers? Are they achievable? Can we benchmark them? Can we continue to review? Are we getting the best out of what we got that we don't need to change? Or do we need to change? What is that change? And is our intervention a successful one to bring about the change we need in the people that need to change? And often that comes from the owner or the business leader or the manager. Maybe they're the person that needs to change first, but they're looking for everybody else. And that goes back to your first point, Stuart, on when you're talking about the national governing bodies. I've seen it with them. I won't mention any, but there are some great ones, some I would suggest not so great at this. Certainly with businesses, the people that need to change are the people that you're speaking to. But they don't want you to come in because actually they're saying, well, that means I need to change and I'm on the board or I'm the senior manager. And actually, I prefer to push it out to somebody else. The vulnerability of saying, actually, yes, I need some support here. Maybe we're not fit for purpose. Maybe we need to make some adaptations to what we do and not look at where the problem is elsewhere. And I think that also is a challenge within organizations where you're looking at the senior members are the people bringing in the specialists or identifying something needs to change. Are they first self-reviewing themselves? Are they being honest enough and objective enough to go, actually, is it us before we look at others? That point about change starts at self. I think these are all the dynamics that we're working with.
Yeah, I think it's one of the reasons why I think the self-review process and the fact that, as part of the rule of three, self-evaluation, peer evaluation, managerial or leadership evaluation in that order, and one happening before the other, ideally. I think one of the reasons that's so important, and the framing around what is acceptable and UAE is acceptable and exceptional, is so important, because again, what this is doing is placing ownership with the individuals who are central to the actual delivery. And the benefit of that is that the feedback you get all the time then helps you to iterate. It helps you to get that perspective and the sense of where you are. And I actually think very often when you have organizations where leaders are expected, or if not, sometimes where leaders make all the decisions, and therefore those people who are sort of closer to the coalface, so to speak, they find it easier just to sort of abdicate responsibility. Oh, well, the leaders will make all the decisions. I'm not paid to do any of that. And when that happens, you lose the connection between what's happening, and then you lose that natural insight gathering and adaptation around an organization's health. And that's when they then bring in all the consultants to do the health checks and the surveys and all those sorts of things. But actually, it's a feature of the sort of disconnect between a leadership group and the people who are essentially the kind of means of production, so to speak. Probably the wrong language, but you know what I mean. That's if you need all of that sort of stuff, that's where you get that's a feature, because the dialogue isn't right, the corporate culture isn't right. You haven't got that sort of conversation happening on a regular basis. You're not in touch with where people are going and how they're performing and all that sort of stuff. And I've been in so many organizations over my career where things like PDRs, so you could say ARP is a form of a performance development review process or something along those lines. But PDRs are really a once a year thing, and they're performative. They're done to make it look like managers are doing their jobs. And sometimes they're attached to pay. Sometimes they're attached to, kudos. Sometimes they're attached to opportunities for advancement, maybe something along those lines. But rarely are they actually genuinely done. This should be part of a regular weekly dialogue or a monthly dialogue, or part of a one-to-one that a leader would have with his team or her team. And that's and because that doesn't really exist, that then means that the leadership and the cultural environment becomes impoverished. And then you're at the mercy of these things happening to you because you haven't got the ability to adapt. And so the communication flow is so valuable. When people think, oh, this is hard work, it's difficult, I've got to implement all this. Yeah, it pays you back like tenfold. Not easy to do, otherwise everybody would be doing it, right? And they wouldn't need your support and guidance. But it does make a big difference. I mean, facing into some of that at the moment.
And if we're going back to one of the first points you made, Stuart, also is I was a keynote last week for British Equestrian, and they're starting their Olympic cycle again, Paralympic cycle, and they're a great example of they were world leaders, and so what they were doing was working. But in recent years, there's been other nations that have really started to invest in equestrian, and all of a sudden the gap is now closed. Now, it's not because they've regressed in what they were doing. It's actually now because others are catching up and to a degree overtaking in certain areas. They've now got to look and say, what we were doing is no longer sufficient to get the success that we want. So now we've got to look at how can we enhance what we're doing and looking at every single element. And that's why they brought me in to have a look. So I observed over the days and then presented to have a look at, could I be somebody that could support them in that change? They're now recognizing that for us to be number one again, what we were doing to get us number one in the past cannot work in the future. So that's an example, as you're saying there, is the world is changing. So we have to change. Although we were number one, if we keep doing that, we will no longer be number one. So what is it we need to do? And being focused on what's the need and invest in that change there. The Edinburgh Hockey Club's the same. They're looking at an 18-month to be number one in Scotland as a club, from grassroots all the way through to the senior. And they were once, but they didn't change in the way the world was changing. And now they are fully committed into saying it's not going to take a couple of months. We're going to invest 18 months into building our culture, our behaviors, how we interact with parents within every single player of every age group, to one, keep the ones we have and engage them, but also be the one that parents want to take their kids to and drop them off. And performance players that say, I want to come and be in your club because I see that's the club I want to be part of. So that won't happen overnight. So they've set an 18-month. It's same as British Equestrians looking at a year to embed the first set of changes for the World Championship, not expected for a couple of months. So these are the type of organizations, and the same as James with Williams F1, that are recognizing change takes time, but it's not just about a time. It's what are we doing today that's going to have the impact that's going to impact tomorrow, that's going to impact next week, next month, next year. And that's where we're focused. Do we know the direction? Do we know what we're looking at? Do we know what we need to do to support and embed the change? And as we've mentioned many times, Stuart, going back all the way when we first went on that course with golf, is recognizing and overtly celebrating when there's been a positive shift in behavior, when there's been a mini win, when there's been those exceptionals, and not only have the conversations when things are unacceptable. So this is back to, I think we spoke the last time, or one of the other conversations is, if we're only reviewing in detail when something goes wrong, fundamentally our reviewing process is not fit for purpose. Our accuracy of evaluation when things go very well or neutral or not right should be the same level of accuracy in state, judgment, choice, execution, commitment, that evaluation on the controllables, to allow us to learn from the best practice and repeat, or know do we need to adjust now? Or was it one of those things that we just keep doing this, we won't get the results yet, but actually it's still the right choice for execution. We're just not ready yet, but let's keep doing them. So that's the fact of performance is a behavior, not an outcome. Not look at the result now and go, we need to change. I go, actually, no. We're on the right path. We're just not there yet to see the result outcome. But based on our measures, we are minimum acceptable based on what we've pre-agreed, based on our measures of performance now that will build us for the future.
Love it. Right. Well, that's a good way for us to wrap up this week's episode. There's a lot going on in the world, isn't there? Lots of food for thought, lots of things to do. I mean, we've got an interesting live case study going on in a couple of places that I'm involved, where you're doing some deployment, which at some stage we'll probably talk about and reflect on. Yeah. But lots of that stuff happening very much in a lot of what you just said there really resonated with, some of the lived experiences of working within organisations. We need to talk about my hockey club as well, because I think we could do with an intervention as well. The leader there is rubbish, i.e. me, or at least I need a bit of a refresh around how we can implement some of this stuff with a group of volunteers and all those sorts of things. So there's something to be discussed at a future date as far as how we might implement some of these things with, it's very easy to talk about professional places where people do this for a living, or a business where people are actually, making a bit of this. But when you have a voluntary space, there's a different kind of, the principles are the same, but the application might be slightly different. And it might be worth exploring that for anybody who's leading a community sports club like I am, and seeing how some of these principles could be embedded. Trail that one for next time.
And I'd say, if anyone's listening to this, I know we've had a lot of sort of long sentences, but the one thing I'd say take from this is for anyone recognizing they're not happy where they are in performance behaviors in the organization or at sport or business, is make sure if you're looking at change, don't just look for change. Give yourself a year, 18 months. Be patient with it, but actually ask yourself, is it change, or is it just we need to tighten up on the interdependency of who we have now? If it is change, we know what it is, linked to the direction, and are we making sure everyone that needs to change is understanding the value? And always look at yourself first, whether that's recording yourself in corporate business meetings, one-to-ones, if you're coaching, record yourself and see, am I doing and being the person of excellence that I think I am before I look at anyone else? So there's some things you can take away already. But my big, for any organization working with, I've got a conversation with another country's Olympic team for the next Olympics again. They're looking for the same type principle, is the time required, and give it the time, plan the time in, set your expectations fair, and then know how you're starting, win the hearts and minds, and then start the little steps, knowing you're probably going to get more regress and progress initially. That's part of the journey of change. Be fine with it.
Cool. Thank you, Mark. See you again for our next recording.
Thank you.